It was just another sunny morning in Los Angeles, until Robert Downey Jr. walked into a luxury car dealership. What happened next? No one saw it coming. Dressed down in his signature effortless style, leather jacket, aged jeans, and a low-key vibe, Robert strolled through the city almost unnoticed. Most stars wear fame like a crown. He wears it like an old t-shirt, comfortable but never showy. A nod here, a smile there, always grounded, always human. He stopped by his favorite cafe, the kind of place where the barista knows your order and your dog's name. "Morning, Oliver," Robert said with a grin. "The usual." "Coming right up, Mr. Stark," the barista joked. With coffee in hand, Robert's thoughts drifted. He had a mission, not for a movie, not for publicity, but something personal. He'd been hunting for the perfect classic car, not just to own but to restore, and then auction off for charity, a symbol of his passion and purpose. All in one frame. He had one particular dealership in mind, known for selling rare machines with price tags as bold as their horsepower. It wasn't just about the car, it was about the story he could build around it. And that's where the unexpected began. As Robert stepped through the dealership's pristine glass doors, he entered a world soaked in luxury. Gleaming marble floors, polished chrome. The air smelled like new leather and quiet judgment. Sharp-suited staff buzzed about, flashing smiles at high-rolling clients dripping in designer labels. Robert, in his worn boots and relaxed swagger, barely got a second glance. Barely. He moved with purpose, drawn to a vintage beauty tucked away near the back. A rare model. Sleek curves, flawless paint, and an unmistakable presence. He was hooked. "Excuse me?" he said to a salesman scrolling on his phone. "Mind telling me about this one?" The salesman barely looked up. "Someone will be with you," he muttered, before vanishing like he'd never been there. Robert stayed calm, but the slight furrow of his brow hinted at irritation beneath the surface. Still, he waited, studying every inch of the car, every line and shadow, blocking out the growing hum of whispers and side-eyes from the staff. "Does he even know where he is?" one voice murmured. "Yeah, not the buying type," another chimed in. He heard them, he always does, but he didn't flinch. And then the manager arrived. Slow steps, judgmental eyes, a smirk that said more than words ever could. He looked at the car, then at Robert. "This model's exclusive, very rare," he said, his tone more gatekeeper than guide. "That's exactly what I'm looking for," Robert replied evenly. The manager scanned him top to bottom. Disdain, doubt, even a touch of challenge. "Well," he said with a sly smile, "I hope you're ready. This car's not for just anyone." Robert smiled faintly, eyes locked. "Good thing I'm not just anyone." But the manager didn't know who he was talking to. He didn't realize this wasn't some window shopper. This was Robert Downey Jr., global icon, philanthropist, and a man whose story ran far deeper than what met the eye. And when the truth came out, the fallout wouldn't just be surprising, it would be unforgettable. It wasn't just the elegance of the car that had Robert's attention. It was the story it carried in its curves, the soul of its design. He admired the fine lines, the flawless finish, and the way it felt like something preserved from another time. This wasn't just a machine, it was a legacy. And Robert knew exactly what he wanted to do with it. But around him the mood was shifting. The quiet murmurs, the not-so-subtle glances. It was as if his presence alone was causing discomfort. Then came the manager, Richard. He moved like he owned the floor. Shoulders back, chin high, eyes sharp. Every step he took screamed status. When he reached Robert, he stopped short, arms crossed, flashing a smile that said, "You don't belong here." "Interested in this model?" he asked, sarcasm practically dripping from his tone. Robert nodded politely. "Yeah, it's an impressive piece. I'd love to know more about it." But Richard wasn't really listening. His eyes were scanning Robert's jacket, his worn jeans, the lived-in look that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with authenticity. He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Interesting," he muttered with a condescending smirk. "This is one of our most exclusive models, not something just anyone gets to own." The air thickened with tension. Robert didn't flinch. He simply stood his ground, eyes steady, voice calm. "I'm aware, that's why I'm here." But Richard wasn't backing down. He shifted, almost blocking Robert from the car. "You realize this beauty costs more than a mansion in Beverly Hills, right? We don't usually show it to browsers." Still, Robert kept his tone steady. "I'd just like to learn more." Then came the dry laugh, the kind that doesn't hold any joy. Richard leaned in slightly. Look, cars like this aren't just vehicles. They're statements. They're for people who fit the profile, who live the lifestyle, understand the value. And with all due respect, you don't exactly seem like the type. Robert's expression didn't change much, but something behind his eyes did. A quiet shift, the kind that happens when someone's patience meets principle. Profile, he echoed, as if testing the word on his tongue. Yes, profile, Richard repeated, louder this time, as though saying it again would make it sound more reasonable. These cars represent success, exclusivity, power, things that, frankly, don't align with... He gestured broadly at Robert's appearance. Well, this. The silence that followed felt like the moment before a storm. Even the staff, who had been pretending not to watch, were now fully locked in. Robert looked at Richard for a long beat. Then, in a voice that was still low, but sharper now, he said, "It's curious how you can judge a person's worth by their wardrobe. Says a lot more about you than it does about me." Richard didn't like that. His smile dropped. He stepped closer, his voice now lowered, venom curling beneath the surface. "Listen, buddy, I see your type all the time. They come in here, gawk at the cars, dream a little, and leave. So if you're here to play make-believe, I suggest you stop wasting my time, and my staff's." Robert didn't move an inch. But he wasn't just standing still, he was holding space, holding principle. His voice dropped, just enough to make the manager lean in. "And what if I'm not here to dream?" he asked simply. Richard scoffed. "Then you're in the wrong place. This dealership's for people who can pay, people who matter, people who, unlike you, have something to prove." The insult hung in the air like smoke. The employees nearby had stopped hiding their interest. Customers glanced over, sensing that something real was unfolding, something raw. Robert looked at Richard with a small, knowing smile. Not smug, not amused, but clear. "Funny," he said quietly. "I always thought real luxury was treating people with respect. Maybe you should try it sometime." The words landed like a punch wrapped in velvet, and for the first time, the manager's polished facade cracked. Robert stood his ground, unshaken, composed, but unmistakably firm. The tension was no longer building, it had arrived, and what came next would shift the room entirely. Richard doubled down, his voice now pure venom cloaked in authority. "People like you," he spat, "only come here to waste everyone's time. This isn't a park stroll, and it's definitely not a showroom for dreamers in scuffed jackets and empty pockets." Robert tilted his head, watching the man with quiet precision. His gaze didn't waver. It cut clean. Then, with deliberate calm, he spoke. "Funny," he said, his voice low but sharp. "You talk about wasting time, yet you're so busy judging people by their clothes instead of their character. Maybe it's time to rethink what actually matters." Richard's eyes flared, his frustration now outpacing his composure. He stepped forward, breaching Robert's space, clearly trying to provoke. "Oh, I know what matters," he hissed. "And it's not lectures from someone who walks in here like they belong in this world. You don't know who you're talking to." Robert didn't blink, didn't back down. His calm only deepened, and somehow that unnerved Richard even more. The manager cracked. "You don't tell me what to do," Richard roared, his arm shooting upward in a reckless burst of anger, fist raised as if to strike. But Robert moved with instinctive control. His hand shot up, catching Richard's fist mid-air. It was swift, smooth, precise. Not an act of aggression, an act of restraint. A pause in time. Silence. The entire showroom went still. Employees froze. Customers gasped. Even Richard's breath caught in his throat. Robert held the man's clenched hand in place. Not tightly. Just firmly enough to say, "You're not going any further." His voice, when it came, was unshaken. It cut through the silence like glass. "That anger you're feeling," he said, eyes locked with Richard's, "it's not about me. That's yours to deal with. Maybe stop dumping it on everyone else." Then, just as calmly, he let go. Richard stumbled back a step, stunned, but the air had shifted. His ego had no place to hide anymore. The power he'd been trying to wield was now slipping. Fast. Robert adjusted his jacket, took a small step back, and looked at the man one last time. "Respect," he said, almost like a quiet challenge, "doesn't cost a dime. But for some people, it's harder to find than any car in this showroom. He turned and began to walk away, his steps echoing crisply against the marble floor. The hush in the room remained, tension replaced by awe. But just before reaching the doors, Robert paused. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a young man standing still near the edge of the room, holding up a phone. He'd captured it all, from the first insult to the final restraint. And now, his hands trembled, not from fear, but from a quiet sense of justice. Robert met the young man's gaze. A silent moment passed. The kid gave a subtle nod, respectful, resolute. Robert returned it with the faintest of smiles, then stepped into the Los Angeles sunlight, leaving behind only footsteps and silence. Back inside, Richard stood awkwardly among a sea of stares, some shocked, others judgmental, all unmistakably changed. He tried to regroup, but the weight of the moment had already crushed the illusion of control. The video, it didn't stay hidden. By morning, it was everywhere. It began with a shaky frame and ended with a quote that ignited the internet. Robert Downey Jr., one of the most respected and down-to-earth figures in Hollywood, publicly humiliated in a luxury showroom and handling it with grace. The footage showed Richard sneering, belittling, and ultimately snapping. But it was the moment Robert caught his fist, without flinching, without escalating, that became legend. The line, "Respect doesn't cost a dime." But for some people, it's harder to find than any car in this showroom, was shared across headlines, social media, memes, and talk shows. Online, the outrage was immediate. Who treats Robert Downey Jr. like that? The man's pure class. That manager just lost more than a sale. He lost credibility. Downey handled it like a king. That's real power. What started as a quiet visit to admire a car became a masterclass in dignity under fire. And for Richard and the dealership, the fallout had just begun. They appeared everywhere. Entertainment blogs, news outlets, talk shows. Within hours, the video wasn't just trending, it had ignited a wildfire. This wasn't just about disrespecting a customer anymore. This was about disrespecting Robert Downey Jr., a man known around the world, not just for his films, but for his humility, his humanity, his journey. The narrative spread like oxygen to a flame. Outrage poured in from all directions. Celebrities, journalists, fans, ordinary people who had seen too many doors closed for the wrong reasons. The public didn't just defend Robert, they demanded change. This wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a reckoning. Luxury, elitism, prejudice. The dealership became a symbol of everything people were tired of. And the backlash? Immediate, relentless. Their social media was flooded. Hundreds of thousands of comments, shares, messages. Hashtags calling for boycotts. Reviews dropping from 5 stars to 1 like falling dominoes. Their once polished brand was now covered in digital graffiti. Clients pulled out, appointments were cancelled, even loyal buyers quietly walked away. And at the centre of it all, Richard, the same man who once strutted through the showroom like he owned the air in it, now drowning in it. He tried to fight back, releasing a rushed statement. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't recognize Mr. Downey. My behavior was misinterpreted. But the excuses rang hollow, empty. The internet saw right through them. Then came the leaks. Anonymous employees began speaking to reporters, confirming what the world already sensed. Richard had always been this way, arrogant, condescending, a man who measured worth in wallets and shoes. He always acted like he was better than everyone, one staffer confessed. Didn't matter who you were, unless you looked rich, he treated you like dirt. The dealership's image shattered. Behind the scenes, employees were fearing layoffs. Executives scrambled for crisis managers. The luxury showroom, once buzzing with polished shoes and pressed suits, now sat nearly empty. The echo of silence replaced the hum of business. And Robert, he stayed silent. No interviews, no social media rants, no revenge tour. He stayed home, calm, grounded. He reflected not on the insult, but on the larger truth behind it. The kind of truth that gets shrugged off until someone with a platform stands still long enough for the world to notice. Because this wasn't about him. It never had been. It was about anyone who had ever been underestimated, looked down on, dismissed because of how they dressed or how they spoke or where they came from. And Robert, he wasn't going to let this moment vanish into the internet's short memory. He picked up the phone and called a friend. The video's out. People are watching. But if this just ends with outrage, nothing changes. I want to do something real. The friend asked him what he planned to do. Robert smiled softly. Handle it my way. He knew what he had to do, not for revenge, but for the story, the message, the opportunity. He thought again about that car, the one that had caught his eye in the first place. Not just a vehicle now, but a symbol of dignity, of choice, of reclaiming the narrative. I need to go back. A few days later, he did. No press, no entourage, no cameras, just Robert, casual jacket, quiet presence, that unmistakable calm. When he stepped through the dealership's doors, the shift was instant. The energy collapsed. Conversations stopped, heads turned, people froze, not because he was a celebrity, but because of what he now represented. And behind the counter, Richard. But this wasn't the same man from before. His complexion was pale, his eyes jittered with nerves. Gone was the bravado, gone was the smirk. In its place stood a man who had been publicly humbled and knew it. Robert walked past the stairs and went straight to the car, the same car. His hand brushed its surface again, just like before, except this time the tension wasn't in the car, it was in the room. Richard stepped forward slowly, his voice wavered. Mr. Downey, I want to apologize for everything. I think we got off on the wrong foot. If you'll allow me, I'd be honored to walk you through the vehicle you were interested in. Robert turned. His eyes met Richard's. Steady, clear, then calmly. Start over, he repeated. Richard hesitated. Yes, sir. But Robert wasn't done. I think you still don't get it, he said. This isn't about how you treated me. It's about how you treat people. Richard opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Robert continued. Respect isn't something you reserve for the rich or the famous. It's not a filter you apply to faces or outfits. Either you have it or you don't. The words rang out like a final note in a silent concert. Richard tried again, but Robert held up a hand gently. I came here looking for a car, and maybe, in the middle of all this, I found something more important. A mirror for you, for this place, for everyone watching. He looked around the showroom, now quiet, reflective. Let this be a lesson, he said. Not a warning, not a threat, just a shift. Treat everyone like they matter, because they do. And with that, Robert turned back to the car. Ran his hand along the curve once more, paused, then said softly, let's talk numbers. The room exhaled. I came here looking for something special, something that meant something to me, Robert said quietly, standing before Richard and the stunned silence of the showroom. But what I found can't be repaired with an apology. He looked around once more at the employees, the walls, the cars. This isn't the place I'll be buying my car from. The weight of his words dropped like a stone. Richard shrank where he stood, his eyes downcast. The room was frozen, caught between shame and clarity. The silence wasn't awkward. It was necessary. Robert turned to leave, but paused at the door. His voice cut through the air once more, calm, yet unshakable. I hope this moment stays with you. Not just you, Richard, but everyone here. True luxury isn't a polished floor or a sleek machine. True luxury is respect. And that seems rarer than any model you've got parked in this showroom. And with that, he walked out. No fanfare, no entourage, just quiet power. In the days that followed, the story didn't fade, it evolved. People stopped talking just about the incident and started talking about the lesson. Robert had once again turned a personal slight into a powerful global reflection. Soon, a photo appeared on Robert's social media. Him standing beside a modest car at a small family-run dealership. No velvet ropes, no valet, just a genuine smile beside a man named Sam, the owner. The caption was simple. True luxury is being treated with respect. Thank you for reminding me of that. It went viral. People across the world began sharing their stories of being judged, dismissed, looked over, but also stories of hope, of kindness, of unexpected dignity. Hashtags like respect is luxury and learn from Robert spread across the internet. Brands took notice. Businesses began holding internal workshops on inclusion. Luxury automakers rewrote their marketing narratives, not out of fear, but out of realization. Meanwhile, the original dealership collapsed under the weight of its arrogance. Richard was removed, the company restructured, but the trust? Long gone. And as for the car, Robert bought, he didn't just drive it, he turned it into something more. The vehicle was auctioned at a global charity event, with all proceeds going toward causes that support inclusion, dignity, and equal treatment. That night, Robert took the stage, humble as ever. This car was just a machine, until the story behind it changed. Now, it represents something money can't buy. The simple truth that how we treat each other matters. And if a single moment can start a conversation, 1,000 more can start a movement. The crowd rose to their feet, not for the actor, but for the message. Sometimes it only takes one voice to remind the world what really matters. Robert Downey Jr. didn't raise his voice. He didn't retaliate. He led with dignity, and in doing so, turned a moment of disrespect into a movement of change. Because in the end, respect doesn't cost a thing, but it's the most valuable thing we can give.